We're going to get started this afternoon with a quick chat about igniting authentic learning in students. So I'm very excited about this because as we get ready for back to school, I always felt overwhelmed and super nervous, and I started having anxiety dreams about doing everything perfectly. And so I'm excited to have Olivia Becker here, and tell us a little bit about yourself, Olivia.
All right. My mom just came online, so I have to say hi to her. But I teach second grade at Rita Murphy Elementary in Bismarck. And I'm really excited for back to school as we kind of prepare. I kind of started with innovation very slowly and project-based very slowly. I'm always willing to try different things out. So it was a lot of kind of exploring different tools, reading different books about project-based learning, and then kind of having a mentor and a coach as well to help guide through that process.
Did you have anything that you particularly turned to when you were reading?
You know, I would say, and I have right here, and I think I posted in that resource packet, but if not, as you can see, I have a ton of stickies, but Reading with Meaning by Debbie Miller was probably the most eye-opening resource for me. It just, everything she was saying, it was about building community and kind of these lifelong learners, and we're setting these students up to have these resources that were not only applicable in the classroom, but in their real world at home. And it was just a really great eye-opening kind of gateway book, I would say.
I love the fact that you just called it a gateway, as if this type of teaching is so awesome. It's a kind of drug that is going to suck us all into this vortex of teaching in a different way. But I also think that the other thing that really interested me that you said was that idea of authentic learning for kids. That's what it's all about. So I taught high school English, and I would be so rich if I had just gotten paid every time a kid said, when am I ever going to have to blah, 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 blah. And I feel like if that was true coming in high school English class, where we're literally talking about writing and communicating, things that people literally do every single day, if kids feel that way about writing in English, man, I was doing something wrong. Like if it wasn't clear to them why what I was doing was important to what they were going to do in the future. So I love this space to have a conversation about how do you help ignite authentic learning for kids? How do you get them excited? Because the other thing I see, I got to go to Olivia's classroom last May. And granted, it was May, so the kids are excited because they can go outside. And I got to go to Jessica is here from Ashley, North Dakota. I got to go to her classroom, third graders last year. And everyone is so excited to be at school and to be learning. And as a high school teacher, I would look at these lovely little people and go, at what point does that die? Because by the time I had them in high school, and I think that this kind of authentic learning is a way to keep that spark alive for kids. So this resource packet, we're not going to go through the resource packet, but everything is linked. So if you're on this front page, you can link down to Genius Hour. And then there are some resources here. I'm just going to scroll down to some of these resources about PBL. Would you say that's how you started getting into more student-driven work, was more project-based learning?
Yeah, when I began teaching, I'm into my 5th year, so Bismarck Schools was kind of adopting project-based learning. So that summer, even before I taught, I was trained in it. And
cool.
Yeah, and so every year I've implemented a few projects, and it was just this kind of the past couple of years where I really kind kind of got it down in a sense where I was understanding that project-based, it has always been around. We've had thematic units with teaching, but I think what really sets PBL apart is the authentic audience and that real world application where we're choosing topics that relate to them. Because I think of so much of traditional teaching, it doesn't apply to their lives or when they go home. It's, you know, filling out this worksheet and then turning it in. Where project-based, it really, students are using their strengths in these projects and they're taking what they're learning home with them at night. And they care about the project too. I took this training uh, by Smokey Daniels, The Curious Classroom. He writes about inquiry-based. So at the beginning of this school year, I want to do a lot of just kind of open-ended inquiry, kind of like the Genius Hour, where students are just, you know, coming into school and they're working on their wonderings. You know, what are you curious about? What do you have passions about? And in that book, there's so many different examples of independent things, teamwork, grouped activities. But I think with a changing world that we're just living in, we need to be teaching kind of those soft skills, like communication, collaboration, that can be just really transferable.
I heard someone this summer, I was talking to someone here where I work at Prairie Public who's an engineer, and he echoed something similar because he was talking about how much his career, he was trained as an engineer, he went to school to do engineering, and I asked him, he's been here at Prairie Public for about 15 years, and I said, so how much of your schooling is still applicable to what you do here as an engineer, something that I don't think of as being, you know, rapidly changing unless you're in maybe software engineering. And he said basically nothing. Like there's basically nothing that I learned in college that I still use and is applicable to the kinds of problems that I'm asked to solve. And he said, you know, there are two kinds of people in this world: people who have learned how to learn and people who haven't. And I love, as soon as you said, like, giving kids space to work on their wonderings, I got this vision of just a wall and a picture of every kid, and, you know, just say, I'm wondering, and then kids posting questions that they're wondering about. And then they have space to just explore that. And as a high school teacher, as I've been thinking about Genius Hour and that really vital question, has a kid learned how to learn? Have they learned how to teach themselves something new? What kind of space could I have been better at providing so that students in my English classroom could explore topics that were more of interest to them? How do you have you're saying you might start Genius Hour this year. Do you have a sense of how you might set that up or what that might look like in your classroom?
You know, I think last year, I don't call it Genius Hour because it's not just, I don't want to label it as just like an hour we're having this time where you get to explore your needs. But I think I want to just give students time to dive into this. And I think that I'm going to start this inquiry by just, being curious myself and modeling that for students. In that book too, they have like this curious notebook, and where you just document everything that you're curious about. I'm going to start, I took a plane ride to San Francisco, and I was just amazed by these clouds, like just the changing clouds and everything. So that's going to be kind of my kickoff, just clouds, me researching clouds, to hopefully ignite them. And just like you said about having a picture of them and then their wonder, I want to create like a bulletin board like that, but then also a place where they can put up their learnings as they go. Because even, I mean, second grade, it's hard to, I think of that management piece. Like, how do I know that students are actually accountable and they're, you know, have objectives and deliverables, where I think it'll be nice to maybe just have, you know, a space where they can put kind of this like reflective piece where we kind of write down, you know, what are some goals that I want to accomplish today? When is this, when am I going to be done with this research? And when I'm done, who am I
Sure.
going to share it with? So I think just action steps.
Oh, there's so many things that are clicking in my brain as you're talking because
Yeah.
I love that of like, when am I done? Because
Mhm.
all too frequently, as soon as the kid hands something in and then we slap a grade on it, the learning is done.
Yeah.
Right? I can't count the number of times, and sorry, high school English, we wrote papers.
Mhm.
I diligently wrote notes on papers, gave them back to children as a way to help encourage their learning, right? And they looked at the grade at the top and then they threw the paper away.
Yeah.
So what learning happened? Yes, there was learning through the writing process. Um, but I like what you're saying of what is that whole process and when
Yeah.
is it done, and helping them see, because you have some perfectionists who will never be done, and we have to coach them through that too. And we have some kids who will just take the least. So we need to help them see where that is. Jessica asked a question about Daily Five. Is that something that you've integrated into your classroom? Do you do Daily Five as part of that?
I actually kind of have gone away from Daily Five because I struggled with the fact that, you know, let's say a student is really interested in dinosaurs and they're doing all this dinosaur research. I feel if they're passionate about that, they're reading about that, they're researching about it, they're sharing their ideas, why put a 20-minute cap on that? Why not let them use that whole hour or that my whole reading block for that exploration? I always hated like, or even too, just the simple act of reading. If a student is really enjoying reading a book, why limit their time? You know, I think Daily Five is a great structure management piece, but I always reflect back to myself and think of myself as a learner. You know, if I'm doing something I really enjoy doing, I don't want to stop it. And yes, there are sometimes that we need to stop things, but um, I just find that for myself, I like that to give students that choice and that freedom to work on whatever they want to work on, what they're passionate about,
Mhm.
but we need to align that to, you know, some deliverables and objectives too.
Okay. So then so you have some framework. I'm
Mhm.
wondering, Jessica, are you willing to share how you've used Daily Five to help students explore things that they're interested in?
Yes, I don't know if can I talk,
Mhm.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
You're good.
Okay, I agree with you 100%, like not to put the cap on it or whatever. Last year when Darcy was in my classroom, we really got started on Storybird as a means for them my students during Daily Five, which I don't usually go like I'm not as traditional as far as the 20 minutes and we stop or the 20 minutes and, you know, I use it more, we go with the flow with it. And anyways, last year with the Storybird, I had students who at the beginning of the year wouldn't even write not even 3 or 4 sentences and their story was done. They had all the main parts that a story needs. And by the end of the year, they were writing probably, I don't know, 5 to 10 pages on Storybird. Yes, it was 3rd grade level. And then they would get to go read it to the preschool classroom. And some of them did nonfiction stories. Some of them did fiction stories and whatnot. So that was where, I mean, their writing last year just exploded with that. So I'm hoping that it happens again this year. We'll see.
Yeah.
New kids, new interests.
Hmm.
I put the link to Storybird, what Jessica was talking about, in the chat. It's just storybird.com.
Cool.
And there are lots of ways to stimulate that. I'm sure people have different hours, different methods of doing that. I am curious, as we do have a few other teachers on, a few other folks, how have you helped students find, or how have you helped nurture student voice in your classroom? Are there any things that you do that help give student choice in big or small ways? I mean, Olivia is talking about some really big systems, but I think sounds fair to say that this has been a shift
Mm-hmm.
in the 5 years that you've been teaching, of shifting to more and more student-driven inquiry. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I go back to, my first year teaching, and I was a very traditional teacher where, I gave some choice and voice, but it was very daily 5, here are your things you need to do. Um, and they could, yeah, I don't know if I even gave much choice back then, but then I slowly gave that away. So kind of during my reading time or morning time, I do have like a non-deliverable, I call it. So one thing that I want students to do during that reading time.
Mm-hmm.
So they get to choose when they do it. Yeah, so I still have some control in what they're doing, but other than that, I give a lot of it out. Um, because I've just felt like students are more accountable. They have student agency when they're in charge of their learning. And it's just, I think, so real world too. I like to choose when I come to work and what I'm working on before my students arrive. So I think of that with my kids. And of course, there's going to be always, it seems like, those certain kids who will never do my deliverable, you know? You always know who they're going to be, but I think that's just too where, well, now we got to do that during your recess time or your time.
Sure. So there are still consequences. It's
Yeah.
not that this isn't about giving the whole classroom over to students. This
No.
is about helping empower them to find their interests. What you were just saying aligns with this quote, this Sylvia Chard quote, about that it makes school like more like real life. Like you were just saying, you like to have some control of when you come to work and how you do
Yeah.
things. I've long joked. Yeah, go ahead.
And I think PBL lends a lens to that, where they're choosing kind of their role in a project and building off of their strengths.
Mm-hmm.
But also there is, I mean, with student choice and voice, yes, you can give it out to your students, but in a sense too, I'm kind of maybe working behind the scenes
Right.
more so. Because I think that's a valid concern from teachers, is that, I'm sure some people think of my classroom as kind of a free-for-all. But in the
And
sense,
teachers would never judge another teacher.
yeah, no.
Never. That would never happen.
Don't worry, I get that a lot too.
Yeah. So I think just knowing that, yeah, you're doing what you know is best for kids. And that's, all that matters.
And what you're saying is also very true. I do think that I always worried that people would come into my classroom and think that I wasn't teaching. I don't know why I cared about what they thought, but I always was afraid that people would come in and they would see me sitting at a table having a conversation with kids, but students were leading the conversation and I was just sitting there with my book and like participating in the conversation. Or students would be working in little collaborative groups doing station learning. I had stations for them to explore the traits of romanticism. Very exciting, but they like different things. But I always thought that people they're going to come in and I'm not teaching. I'm just like, the kids are teaching. And then I thought about how much work. So for me, so much more of my teaching took place in the prep, in setting up that project, in creating systems for that to be successful, so that I could, as the year went on, I could take more and more of a back seat and let students take more and more ownership of where we were going in class. And I still don't think I did not get to where I want to be as like helping students, particularly juniors and seniors. I feel like I missed out on an opportunity to really empower them with learning skills to help them for college and for the next things that they were doing. So I would really like more of that. I like what you were saying too about the deliverables. I was in another third grade classroom here in Fargo, a teacher named Cheryl, and she, on her board at the start of the day, she has, you know, like 7 or 8 different kind of bubble tasks. And in general, by the end of the day, you have to finish those bubbles. You have to have completed all of those. And she uses, I think, Google Classroom to organize her content. And so each little bubble is also posted. And some of the bubbles are things that might take a kid a whole week to complete. Some of them are very short. Some of them are like a 5-minute. I think it sounds like kind of what you were talking about, a deliverable. Like, I need you to finish this while, before, after, during you're working on your other stuff. So I like that she had it up visually for the kids to see in the room, and in a classroom content management. Do you have any strategies that you've used or you're planning to use on helping organize this? Because it is controlled chaos of letting kids do things, but it's very sophisticated in what you are actually structuring for them. Do you have any tips on how you've helped lay out the process so that you can manage?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, those first like 30 days of school, so instead of saying, okay, go for it, you know, let's all do different things, it's more so a whole class, we're going to just read. We're all just going to independently read. And then, you know, depending on how successful they are at that, then maybe I'm going to introduce reading with a partner. And then I'll slowly incorporate different things that they can do. And then one might be that inquiry. And then based on that, then I have them choose. So then maybe at the end of September, I might have them choose what they're going to do. And just that. Okay, you hear your 3 options, choose it and go do it. So it's kind of that slow scaffolding of introducing.
A slow release.
Yeah, you know, the teacher does, we do, and just that, to get them to that independence. Starts whole group, and then as they become successful, I just kind of, release that.
That makes perfect sense to me of how we would break down.
Yeah.
I was just having coffee with a teacher named Heidi from Winnipeg, and last spring, I helped her go through and create a PBL, like a month-long PBL project for her grade 7s. That was a cross-curricular unit with social studies and science. And so we were meeting today because I was finding out like more about the steps, but we're going to present at a conference up in Winnipeg in the fall. And one of the things that she pointed out, she was like, I would never start the year with this project, with this PBL. She said, there are too many systems and too many skills that I need to make sure that my students have so they can do the PBL. And so she had this list that was just very simple, but she was like, in order for them to do it, I need to know that they already have researching skills.
Yeah.
I need to have already taught them citation skills. Like, we need to have already gone through these. They already need to have practiced different roles within groups. We need to have done some smaller group in-class activities where they're getting to practice different jobs within a group. And we need to have played with the technology that I might want them to use to do this project. We need to have played with the technology prior to the project so that the project doesn't become who knows the technology the best. The project really becomes about the content and what they have dove into for their research. So I thought what you said really matches what she was saying, that you can't just, there are some things you can start right from day one. Find a book that you are interested in reading, and you're going to read that book. But you maybe can't jump into some of these bigger aspirational things day one because kids don't have the skills yet.
No. And yeah, then you would be setting your students and yourself up for failure, for sure. I was talking with one of my teaching partners, Aura, this morning, and, just on PBL, I think it would be so fun to start the year off day one on just how can we build a classroom community? And that be your driving question, so that you're still instilling the PBL lingo, the vocabulary of it.
Right.
And it's so real world. I mean, how do we work together? How do we get to know one another? And it would be just so fun to hear what my students think, and how are we going to be able to trust one another? How are we going to be able to share and be vulnerable with one another? Because I already have some lessons already to go, but it's so fun to hear what they want to, where they want to get.
I love your emphasis on listening to them and finding what might be of interest to them. Erica Dyke, a teacher out in Beulah. Sorry, an announcement here. It's like I'm at a high school. But she was talking about that she started the school year last year. She was new in Beulah, or this was in the last year or two. She was new and she just didn't like the way her room was set up. So she started the year with a mini design project where they were practicing research skills, they were practicing collaboration, but their task was design a proposal for what you envision the perfect English classroom to look like.
Yeah.
So it was exactly what you're talking about, though, where it was safe. It was a very controlled assignment. They weren't just sent off into create something. It was very specific. It was very tangible because it was about this classroom. What would make this space that we are in every single day, what would make this space more appealing to you as a student? And I like your point, too, of what do we need to do as a team, as a class, so that everyone feels safe and comfortable and heard? I'm curious about all those things. I want to test one thing since we do have a few people. I am going to put us into little breakout rooms right now. So I'm going to push a button and it's going to put us into random breakout rooms. And so you won't have all of us on the chat. There's going to be two people in your rooms. And I want you to have a conversation with the person who is in that room with you. We might have lost your mom, so it might not work as well. But if nothing else, you're my guinea pigs. This is part of school, right? We try things as teachers, as people, and we're like, well, that didn't work. So we'll see how it goes. But in theory, I would like you to have a conversation about, and now I think we lost, as soon as I said I'm going to put you in other rooms. Everyone left, so I'm going to skip it because the other two people, as soon as I said, I'm going to have you talk to each other, they signed up. I understand it's scary, but I was also just saying this at lunch. I honestly believe one of the reasons that I've learned so much this last year as I've been outside of the classroom is because I've had the benefit of these beautiful, meaningful conversations with other educators. So what's your go-to resource? I'm on this PBL resource slide. Is there anything on here that and this is in the resource packet for those of you who are doing the resources. There's this great little video of Olivia, that's down here. There's a little overview for PBL. So if we're throwing out terminology that you're like, what's PBL for project-based learning? There's a little overview for you. There's 5 ways to keep the rigor going on. And then just some different websites. Can you tell us a little bit about, let's do this instead. Can you tell us a little bit about PBL World?
Yeah.
Like?
PBL World is held in Napa Valley, California. And I was in, people from around the world come to this week-long yeah, the conference, and it's just amazing to network. And there was someone from Australia in our session, and I was in a coaching session. So we would review different projects and then kind of have action steps on helping the teacher. Because we know that PBL, like if you're just first starting, it's very daunting. There's so much work that goes into planning a PBL. What I love about PBL and the workshops is Project Slice. So Project Slice is, and we did that on Monday, is where you're a student. So you get the facilitator is the teacher, and you are the student, and you just go walk through the steps of a PBL project. And I actually did one in Bismarck, and it was like the most eye-opening thing ever, because our driving question was, how do we redesign this space at Bismarck State College to be purposeful and meaningful to students? And we had to present, and it was fun because were told, there's going to be some people in education that you're presenting to, but we didn't know the scope of who we were presenting to. And it just really upped the ante. And I mean, you're the student, you really want to showcase the best work because you don't know who's going to be listening in tomorrow. So it was just really eye-opening, those two importances of the real world, your projects being real world, and then having an authentic audience.
I was just going to say that authentic audience piece, if you can find a way, like Jessica talked about her Storybird project, the authentic audience there was the third graders went and read their stories to the kindergartners. So there was the bar was higher of, if I'm going to go read this story to other kids in my school, I want it to be a really good story. And your presentations, when you have an authentic audience. So that's a great additional point, that if you're working on to think about what is the outcome, the output. So I don't think there has to be one for like a genius hour. I don't know if there has to be a completion, but when you're thinking about a project-based learning and maybe a genius hour, if you're doing genius hour, maybe there is, maybe you do have reports, you have some sort of sharing, you have some sort of assembly, you have, you bring in parents to listen to things, you bring in community members for the students to pitch ideas to and ask questions. You help set up Skype and Zoom conferences. So the kid who's working on a Genius Hour project can talk to an adult who's an expert in that field. We have all the technology to do that. So be thinking about what is the end for what you're doing. Is there a showcase? If you do a makerspace in your classroom where kids are allowed to tinker and create and build things, is there a carnival where they create those things and share them? Do you create a makerspace museum where there's, a museum night and kids are with their sculptures or with their project and they're demonstrating things? Is there a way for you to build in an authentic audience so that they're getting that feedback from more people than just us as teachers? I think that's interesting. Go ahead.
Well, and I think too, there even can be scaffolding with your audience, because I know kids presenting, that first week, that first month of school, presenting just to me or to their classmates. I mean, that's an authentic audience, but if we fast forward a few months in, they're usually pretty comfortable. So then it's like, okay, who else can we bring in to make it very meaningful too?
Yeah.
I always try to relate it to just what they're researching and what our topic is to someone that needs to know that or should know that, in a sense.
I love that question. Who needs to know this? Who should know this?
Like who should our audience be? If we're researching dinosaurs, who should that be? Should it be a kindergarten classroom, or should it be, someone at the Heritage Center?
And what a great way to also talk about all of those other soft skills, like what you were talking about, of how we code switch. So you were talking about the soft skills in general, but we code switch all the time, right? The way I speak to my significant other is different than the way I might speak to a principal who I'm meeting for the first time, is different than how I speak to my mother, is different. So by asking your students, what a great way to involve them in the project. Again, Olivia, like you keep, I love how you centered on the kids you are and how you keep bringing their perspective into that. But asking them, like, who needs this information? If it's kindergartners, that also drives who your audience is, drives the output. Like, who are you presenting this to? That's going to change the format that it takes. It's going to change the language that you use when you create it. And what a great experience for them to see, like, oh yes, when I present to kindergartners, I need to do things differently than if I'm presenting to the school board, because I'm trying to convince them to change the lunch menu. Like, what a great, not only authentic audience that you're providing for them, but also helping them learn that soft skill of switching between ideas.
I wish soft skills weren't called soft skills.
Right, because they're vital skills.
Yeah.
The skills you need to survive every day. Like how to code switch between different kinds of encounters.
Yeah.
Texting on your phone and how you communicate via Instagram with your friends or Snapchat so you keep your snap streak alive. I've listened to way too many segments. Really. But that communication is very different than what I want you to do when you're writing a research paper. Is very different than when I'm asking you to give a speech or something like that. I think we're about out of time. I want to wrap us up and just keep us somewhat close. But what are your final tips? Where else do you go as a teacher who's striving to do new things? Where do you go for inspiration? How do you stay energized about what you're doing, despite the fact that you may have a naysayer or two? And I'm not saying you do have any naysayers in your building, but let's pretend that you did. Like, how do you stay energized? How do you stay positive about trying these new things and getting inspiration?
You know, I never thought I would be saying this, but Twitter is a great resource for teachers. I mean, it is overflowing. I find that the teachers on Twitter want to be there, and they're the ones trying different things, sharing new resources, and love teaching, and they love education. So I would say that just for like figuring out what books to read, figuring out just different strategies, and that's something, a platform too, where you can ask questions. And I've noticed too that one of my favorite books too is Future Driven. And I've actually been in contact with this author because of Twitter. So I think it's just a really simple, easy platform for educators. For getting started on PBL, I would say BIE. I think it's just BIE.com or BIE PBL. They have just rubrics, resources, even complete, ready to go, high quality projects too that you can, oh, that is not it.
No.
But those would be my go-to resources. And two, you know, if you don't have anyone in your building, find out where you can. From Twitter, I found so many teachers willing to share and wanting to share, and that just gives you another platform for collaborating and using that like as a mystery Skype, or, you know, you could even have another class be your expert for a project, or your audience too.
That's a great point. I too am new to Twitter and have been very excited by it. I think the takeaway for me for all of these projects, whether you're calling it Genius Hour, whether you're calling it a passion project, whether you're providing a makerspace, these are all, as a lot of things in education, we have redundant names for things. Different people name things. And yes, there are differences between these things. I'm not saying they're all exactly the same thing. But to me, what excites me about all of them is it's making space within your school day or your school week to give students control of what and how they are learning. And so whether you're doing a passion project, a joy project, PBL, Genius Hour, Makerspaces, there's lots of resources. We didn't go through hardly anything in this packet really, but on each main resource slide, I've tried to provide, because I have the time that teachers don't, I sifted through and tried to find for you some of the best resources for this subject so that you didn't have to trail around and find it. And I've tried to highlight additional training, like where else can you go? So for quite a few of these things, there are online training modules, free online training modules, and sometimes like once you've gotten more advanced, it gives you options for paid things that do have a fee. But I've made sure that there's always stuff that's for free on here. And then like the recommended reading. If you're not on Twitter, I would second that. And I second it for the main thing. What you just said, Olivia, is so true. You were able to have professional conversations with people that you wouldn't have been able to collaborate with. So if you're in a classroom and you feel like all you're hearing are those negative people who are saying, oh, well, what we currently do is great. I don't know why you're trying that. Or I don't know why you're wasting. If you feel like you're not getting the support that you as an educator need in your building, you're not alone in the things you're trying to do. If you're trying Genius Hour and people are like, oh, what are you doing? They're missing out.
And I want to say too that I find people may be resistant to that or just maybe afraid of it and afraid of that change. And I think too that you would be amazed to see how many standards you're hitting in a Genius Hour, in a Makerspace. I mean, for second grade, I can only speak to second grade, but our reading standards are pretty open. I mean, it's a lot of just figuring out like the main idea and researching different things. So I think like when they're researching something that they want to do, I mean, yeah, it's so many, they're learning so many things. And on top of that, they are learning those critical thinking, the collaboration, communication. And I think those outweigh some of our standards for sure.
For sure. Like you said, they shouldn't be soft skills.
No.
Those should be here are the things that are going to get you a job skills for future success skills. Because that's everything that you just said. So if you are feeling like, I don't have anyone, feel free to email me. I don't want to throw Olivia, like get you overwhelmed, but feel free to email Olivia if you have questions. And then reach out. I have learned, I was a very isolated teacher, in part by geography. I was always a theater teacher, so my room was down on a separate end. But I was also isolated because I didn't really like the conversations that I was hearing in the teacher's lounge. I don't like talking about students unless it's about how awesome they are. I don't really like talking about and complaining about how dumb this is or that is. And so I kind of felt like I didn't have, like that didn't serve a purpose for me. And one of the things that I've learned this last year, because I've gotten to meet people like Jessica and Olivia, people who I wouldn't have met, I've really learned that power of just having a 45-minute conversation with someone who is also passionate about a topic, and how much that can incite and inspire and energize. So I hope that you're getting that. And I've been blessed everywhere I've taught that I've had a couple people in my building. Most recently at West Fargo, more than a couple, like, a whole group of people that really did that. So if you don't have that, let us help you find it so that you can continue igniting this passion. Because we can only ignite, I think, as much excitement about learning as we have about learning with our kids. So reach out to some of us, and you're not alone. This is keep fighting the good fight. There's great people on Twitter to answer questions. People like Olivia are doing this every day. Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks so much. This is what I'm talking about, professional collaboration. Like, now I want to just have a group of kids and start doing Genius Hour with them. Like, you've just energized me so much, and now I'm gonna have to Genius Hour my cat when I get home, I think.
There you go.
We'll see how helpful that is.
Okay.
All right. Well, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next time.